Game systems are not only what makes a game truly entertaining and engaging, but also one of the most difficult things to master. A designer must understand how a system is built and decide how each of its parts will relate to one another. In today's video, I will explain which elements make a system and how to deconstruct it, using an example to illustrate it. In Naughty Dog's latest release, The Last of Us Part 2, the combat design is an excellent example of a strong system that gives the player a lot of choice in how to approach each combat encounter. Before I get to the actual video, I wanted to remind you to please subscribe and like this video if you like this kind of content. To put things into perspective, I will start with the definition of what a system is. Systems are a set of elements or parts that interact together in a network or structure. This can be found not only in games, but also in real life. Examples of these can be the government, a street light, or even the human body. Generally speaking, games usually have tons of systems in them that define how it actually works. There are combat systems, the economy systems, progression systems, among others. Systems are composed of objects, properties, behaviors, and relationships. The objects are the basic building blocks for a system. This can be the character or enemies, even the levels themselves. The properties are qualities that define those objects, for example, the player's life, stamina, damage taken, or damage given. The behaviors are certain actions that an object can do in specific states, like walking, running, shooting, hiding, etc. The relationships are links between different objects. For example, if the player hits an enemy with a weapon, it deals a specific amount of damage to an enemy. Now that we've covered the basics, let's dive into the combat system of The Last of Us Part 2 and see how these concepts come to life. In this game, the player fights against human enemies as well as infected enemies. First of all, the objects in this specific combat system are the player and the enemies, as well as the terrain that the player has to traverse in order to get from point A to point B. This terrain offers the player different ways to approach an encounter, like using verticality, sneaking around enemies, or creating an attack plan. The properties for the player are its life or health, their guns at their disposal, or the items that the player can get in order to craft bombs or health kits. The properties of the enemies are their life as well as the damage done or received, depending on which type of enemy they are. The behaviors for the player are moving, jumping, shooting, hiding, sneaking on an enemy, grabbing an enemy hostage, hitting an enemy, climbing, and swimming. For the enemies, their behaviors are patrolling, shooting, searching for the player, chasing the player, or tracking the player. The relationships are interesting because as a player, you have different types of weapons you can use. However, each of them deals a specific amount of damage, but at the cost of a specific disadvantage. Take the pistol for example. This weapon is versatile and does a medium amount of damage. On the other hand, a shotgun does a lot of damage when in close proximity, yet in contrast, it only does little damage from a distance. Finally, a bomb does a lot of damage, but with the limitation that you can only craft 4 of them at a time, and you need resources to craft them. Another thing to note is that guns that deal more damage tend to have longer animations. This means the player is less vulnerable for the enemy to attack them for a longer period of time. Resources are another property of the combat system. Special weapons tend to have less ammo for the player to pick up than a normal pistol gun. The player has to take all these things into consideration and juggle them depending on the combat scenario that is thrown at them. When designing a system, designers need to consider the type of enemies they're using. There are normal enemies like the humans and some of the zombies in this game, who deal just normal damage, yet are vulnerable to all kinds of damage. You also have larger and more complex enemies who are significantly stronger and can also deal more damage. They also introduce dogs as an enemy in this game. They use the innate abilities of dogs to track the player, pick up the player's scent if they stay in one place for too long, and ultimately attack them. They serve as a good way to avoid players hiding during an encounter by forcing them to keep moving in order to not be found. For the non-human enemies, there are different kinds in this game. There are runners who are weak yet fast, and if there are a lot of them, they can overwhelm you quickly and deal a lot of damage. The stalkers are enemies that hide in the dark, so players need to remain silent while approaching them. If the player makes a sound, they're going to get slammed by them. However, they are weak to shotgun shots, which gives you an advantage, since you can take a lot of them out with a single shot. Clickers are completely blind, which means you can be more mobile around them. However, they use echolocation to track you. This is an advantage for the player, because you can trick them by throwing objects to make noise and distract them. However, the issue is that you need to craft shifts to be able to still kill them. Also, if they find you and grab you, they kill you in one attack. Bloaters are big dudes that have a ton of health. They are able to throw bombs and stun you while damaging you. If they grab you, they also kill you very quickly, so the player's best interest is to attack them from a distance. The last one are the Shamblers. These enemies are similar to bloaters, but they use a poisonous cloud around them that is corrosive and drains your health as you inhale it. As opposed to other enemies, you can kill them while in stealth, so the best approach here is to kill it with bullets or bombs. Now if you connect the dots, you will see how all of these relationships go nicely together. They provide the player with specific strengths. They give you the ability of using different types of weapons, using the environment to your own advantage, crafting things, or being able to attack certain enemies from a distance or in close proximity. On the flip side, they also provide the player with weaknesses, such as enemies who deal more damage and receive less, having to face enemies who are strong against melee combat, monsters that are not killable while in stealth, or enemies who kill you in one shot. All of these elements force the player to take other actions and become proficient in various combat scenarios. You might be wondering how to judge if a system is good or not. A good way to determine this is to pay close attention to the player's behavior when interacting with that system. What is the player doing? Is he doing what you intended him to do? Did you face any obstacles? I can guarantee that the devs at Naughty Dog likely observed very early on in playtests that people were hiding and staying in one place. As a solution, they came up with the idea of dogs, to force the players to move around the environment and try to explore more. I think they also had to balance the types of enemies they put in each level so that players changed their approach constantly. Having to change strategies makes the combat not only dynamic, but also very enjoyable and a fun challenge to play. Essentially, the best systems always have advantages and disadvantages for both players as well as for enemies. When a system is well designed, the players shouldn't feel overpowered, and the enemies should feel challenging, yet manageable enough so that you as a player are not attacking or defending all the time. Finding that balance in the approach and encouraging the player to sometimes attack and sometimes defend, only to go back into attack mode in the next sequence, is a delicate dance that you have to play as a designer. No one is born knowing how to make this work. It comes with practice, playtesting, and a lot of iteration. If you are struggling to find the right balance for your game, I would suggest playing other games that have successfully done what you're trying to achieve and study how their systems are designed so you can learn from them. And that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. What other things do you think are characteristics of a good game system? Please let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified. Don't forget to share it with your friends. See you next time!